You are kinder to strangers than you are to yourself. A friend makes a mistake and you say, "It happens, you are human, move on." You make the same mistake and you drag it behind you for years. Welcome to the Stoic Compass. I am EPICTETUS, and today I am joined by Carl Jung and LAOZI. Today we are examining what does it mean to forgive yourself, and why do we hold ourselves to standards we'd never demand of others? Let me say something plainly. Self-forgiveness is not the issue. The issue is whether you are using guilt as a substitute for change. You feel bad. You replay the mistake. You apologize to yourself 50 times in your own head, and then you do nothing different. That is not conscience, that is performance. The person who genuinely reckons with what they did corrects the behavior and moves forward. The person who wallows stays comfortable inside the story of their own failure. Comfort is the word. Guilt feels like punishment, but for many people it functions as an excuse. You cannot be expected to improve because look how harshly you are judging yourself. That is not accountability. That is a hiding place.
I take your point about wallowing, Epictetus, but I think you are describing the symptom and calling it the cause. The question is not whether someone is being productive with their guilt. The question is where the guilt comes from in the first place. And often it does not come from the actual transgression. It comes from something much older. The inner critic, what I might call the voice that enforces impossible standards, that voice was not invented by the person using it. It was installed by a parent, a culture, a religion, an early wound. When someone holds themselves to a standard they would never apply to another person, that asymmetry is worth examining. Why would a person be more merciful to a stranger than to themselves? That is not logic. That is a pattern with a history.
You are both treating the problem as though it resides inside the person. Epictetus says the guilt is a performance. Jung says it is a wound. But neither of you has asked whether the standard itself is the problem, not where it came from, not what it is doing. The standard, the idea that a person must be without flaw to be acceptable, that is the thing that manufactures the suffering. You cannot forgive yourself inside a framework that declared you unforgivable to begin with. The work is not to process the guilt better. The work is to question whether the standard that created the guilt has any basis at all.
LAOZI, you are asking people to question their standards. I am asking them to act. Those are not the same thing. A person standing in a burning room does not need a philosophical inquiry into whether fire is real. They need to move, and the person who is paralyzed by self-reproach is in a burning room. They need to decide, what can I correct, what is done and cannot be undone, and what exactly am I doing right now except burning? The distinction between what is in your control and what is not applies to your own past, just as it applies to anything else. The past is not in your control. What you do today is grieve what you did wrong, then return to your station.
Grieve and return, yes, but grief that is cut short does not disappear. It goes underground. I have seen this many times in clinical work. A person decides they are done feeling guilty. They move forward as you recommend, Epictetus, and then the self-punishment resurfaces sideways. In their relationships, in the way they sabotage the good things that come to them, in the physical symptoms that arrive when the psyche has no other outlet. The wound that is not metabolized does not leave, it waits. And the double standard you both keep circling, the question of why people are harder on themselves than on others, I want to suggest it is precisely because the self holds a different symbolic weight. To forgive the self is to confront the image of who we believed we were supposed to be. And that image, that ideal self, is not rational, it is archetypal. It was never going to be met by a human being.
Jung, you say the image is archetypal. I say the image is simply borrowed. A person picks up a measuring stick that was handed to them before they could speak, and they spend their whole life measuring themselves with it. And they never think to ask who built it, or whether it measures anything real. The double standard is not mysterious. You are lenient with others because you can see them as separate, as human, as subject to the same forces you are subject to. You are harsh with yourself because you believe, somewhere underneath the argument, that you should have been exempt from those forces, that you should have known better, done better, been better, as though knowing were the same as being capable.
That is closer to something useful, the assumption of exemption. Yes, you believe you should be above the ordinary conditions of being human. Error, delay, failure of nerve, poor judgment under pressure. These are not aberrations. They are the conditions. The Stoic does not expect perfection. The Stoic expects effort and honesty about what happened. When you hold yourself to a standard you would not apply to a person you love, Ask yourself, do you believe that person is less than you? No. Then why do you require more from yourself than from a fully realized human being? The answer usually is not virtue. It is vanity. The secret underneath harsh self-judgment is often the belief that you were supposed to be exceptional, that the ordinary rules did not apply.
That is an interesting inversion, Epictetus. Harshness as grandiosity in disguise. I think there is truth in it. But I want to add something. The harshness is also in many cases a form of loyalty. Loyalty to the parent who demanded the impossible. Loyalty to a system that said you were only acceptable when you performed without error. To release the standard is to release the relationship, and that can feel, unconsciously, like a kind of abandonment or betrayal. This is why telling people simply to forgive themselves rarely works. The forgiveness is not blocked by stubbornness. It is blocked by love, by grief, by an old attachment that has never been consciously examined.
The standard is also sometimes a kind of armor. If you hold yourself guilty, you stay in control of the story. You punish yourself before anyone else can. You decide what you deserve rather than risking that the world will decide for you. That is not weakness. That is a strategy that once made sense. But a strategy built for a smaller, more dangerous life does not dissolve just because the conditions have changed. It has to be seen for what it is before it can be set down.
Then let us agree on at least this much. The person who cannot forgive themselves is not, in most cases, more virtuous than the person who can. They are more attached. Attached to the story, attached to the standard, attached to the performance of suffering as proof of sincerity. Real accountability does not look like ongoing punishment. It looks like changed behavior. It looks like a clear-eyed accounting of what happened and a decision about what comes next. A person who has genuinely reckoned with a failure does not need to keep prosecuting themselves. The trial is over. The question is what they build from here.
I agree that the trial must end. But Epictetus, you keep describing the ending as a decision. And I am saying that for many people, it cannot be a decision alone. The emotional body does not respond to reason on command. You cannot simply conclude that you are forgiven and feel forgiven. The process takes longer. It requires something to shift at a deeper level than the intellect. What that shift looks like varies, but it almost always involves bringing the hidden standard into the open, naming it, questioning it, sometimes grieving the version of yourself you were trying to protect. That is not wallowing, that is the actual work.
The tree does not argue about the storm. It simply bends, and in bending, it becomes more itself. You are both describing a process of struggle, one more efficient, one more thorough. But the person who has genuinely stopped fighting the fact of their own humanity, who has accepted that error is not a violation of their nature, but an expression of it, that person does not need a trial and does not need a lengthy excavation. They simply stop requiring themselves to be what they were never capable of being.
And how does a person get there, LAOZI? That is the question. You describe the destination beautifully. Neither Jung nor I disagree with the destination. We disagree about the path, or rather, we disagree about what the person needs to do when they are still stuck at the gate.
Perhaps the gate opens when you stop trying to force it. That is all I am saying. Most of the effort people put into forgiving themselves is still effort inside the same framework that made forgiveness necessary. You cannot use the measuring stick to measure the measuring stick.
That is well said, though I would add that sometimes the gate has a face on it. Sometimes it is the face of someone who told you that you were not enough. And until you look at that face and say something true to it, the gate does not move regardless of how lightly you touch it.
All of this, and we still have not said the simplest thing. You are not your worst act. You are not your worst moment. You are a person who did something wrong, or failed, or fell short, and who is standing here now with the capacity to do something different. That is the beginning of the only self-forgiveness that is worth having. You have heard 3 arguments. Now hear what is underneath all of them.
Most people think self-forgiveness is about letting yourself off the hook. It is not. It is about understanding what the hook is made of and why you hung yourself on it in the first place. The standard you hold yourself to, the one that would horrify you if you applied it to someone you loved, that standard was not chosen. It was absorbed. Somewhere early in your life, you learned that your acceptability was conditional, that love, approval, or safety depended on your performance. You learned this before you had the language to question it, and so you carry it now as though it were just the way things are. It is not, it is a belief, and like any belief, it can be examined. The reason you are harsher on yourself than on others is not because you are more serious about ethics. It is because the self carries the weight of that original contract. To forgive yourself is to renegotiate that contract. Not to abandon standards entirely, but to replace the inherited, impossible standard with something you have actually chosen, something proportionate, something human. This is not a single moment, it is a practice. Today, try this. Find one thing you have been punishing yourself for and write down the standard it violated. Then ask plainly and honestly, would I hold a person I love to this standard? If the answer is no, write down what standard you would actually apply to them. Then apply it to yourself, not as a performance, as a decision.
The person you have been prosecuting is you, the judge, the jury, the one who keeps extending the sentence, all of you. At some point, the court has to adjourn. Not because what happened does not matter. Because you do. You are not the error. You are what remains after the error, and what you do with what remains is the only question that is still open. Close the trial. Begin the work. If today's conversation has served you, take it further. Pay Attention by C. Trebu, 12 Lessons in the Practice of Seeing Clearly. Available now on Amazon.